It started as a weekend retreat to escape the grind. Four friends, Kyle, Amanda, Sam, and Taylor, set out to a remote cabin nestled deep in the Pacific Northwest. The dense pines stretched endlessly, their shadows crawling over the rugged terrain like skeletal fingers. The cabin was old but cozy, a relic from the 1950s, with creaking floorboards and a musty fireplace. The first night was uneventful, save for the distant howl of coyotes. By the second evening, the atmosphere changed. As the group sat around the fire, laughing and swapping ghost stories, Taylor pointed out the window. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Everyone turned, peering into the inky darkness beyond the glass. A faint, humanoid silhouette lingered at the edge of the tree line, just within the reach of the flickering firelight. "Probably just a deer," Kyle said, though his voice wavered. The figure didn't move. It stood tall, unnaturally tall, and its broad shoulders suggested something far larger than a man. Then, in an instant, it was gone. That night, the woods seemed alive. Twigs snapped outside the cabin, heavy footsteps crunched through the underbrush, and low guttural grunts echoed in the distance. Sam suggested it was a bear, but Amanda noticed something unsettling. The steps didn't sound like four-legged movement. They were deliberate, bipedal. The group tried to laugh it off, but unease settled over them like a damp fog. No one slept well that night. The following day, they explored a nearby trail to clear their heads. The towering trees blocked out much of the sunlight, casting the forest in a perpetual twilight. About a mile in, they found it, a massive footprint sunk deep into the muddy ground. It was at least twice the size of Kyle's boot, with toes clearly defined. Worse, it wasn't alone. A trail of identical prints led deeper into the forest. "Maybe we should head back," Amanda said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kyle, ever the skeptic, rolled his eyes. "Come on! It's just some guy messing with us." But the unease grew as they followed the trail back to the cabin. The woods were unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects, only the sound of their own breathing and the occasional snap of a branch underfoot. That night, the terror began. As they huddled in the living room, a deafening crash shook the cabin. The front door was splintered, hanging off its hinges. In the doorway stood a massive figure, illuminated by the dim glow of their lanterns. Its eyes glinted red, and its matted fur was streaked with mud and twigs. The creature towered over them, its breath ragged and guttural. For a moment, no one moved. Then Kyle grabbed a poker from the fireplace and swung it wildly, screaming for the others to run. The creature swatted him aside like a rag doll, sending him crashing into the wall. The rest of them bolted into the woods, adrenaline drowning out the fear. They ran blindly, branches clawing at their faces and arms. Behind them, the creature's footsteps thundered like a drumbeat, getting closer with every second. They stumbled upon an old ranger station, its windows broken, and its door barely hanging on. They barricaded themselves inside, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Outside, the heavy footfalls stopped. For a moment, silence reigned. Then came the scratching. Long, deliberate scrapes along the walls, the sound of claws dragging across wood. The creature didn't try to break in. It didn't need to. It wanted them to know it was still there. Watching. Hours passed like days. When the first rays of sunlight finally pierced through the cracks, the scratching ceased. They waited until they were sure it was gone before venturing outside. The creature was nowhere to be seen, but the ground was littered with enormous footprints, circling the station. They found Kyle's poker driven deep into the soil, bent like a twig. They never spoke of that night again. But sometimes, in the dead of night, Taylor swore she heard faint, guttural grunts outside her window. The woods never let them forget.